Baxie's Musical Podcast.
Resistance is useless!
In American music, there's a long history of different influences and genres that have collided into each other and fractured into other things. And eventually, those things would have their own collision courses and either create something new or revive the things they came from. For example, rock and roll comes from this convergence of blues, country, gospel, jazz, and about 15,000 other things. And if you notice, no matter how far from its origins it may get, there is this compulsion to always bring things back to their roots. Even at its most avant-garde moments, things always seem to come back to the blues, to rockabilly, and to American roots music. Whether it was with the Cramps, the Gun Club, X, or hundreds of others, these original building blocks have had a resurgence. But for some, it's not a resurgence if it never goes away. What it does become is an art form, pure American art. And among one of the most enduring and original of these artists is my guest today, Tav Falco. In 1973, Tav Falco, a film and theater student at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, would move to Memphis, Tennessee, to begin a group of video artists to document local musicians and other performance artists. He described the effort as art action, and over time, his performances were getting noticed by the likes of Alex Chilton, the legendary voice of the Box Tops. Chilton, who was just coming off the implosion of his band Big Star, was especially impressed by Tav Falco's interpretation of Leadbelly's Bourgeoisie Blues. He then closed the show by cutting his electric guitar on stage with a chainsaw. Now, you don't get any more rock and roll than that. By 1979, both Falco and Chilton would partner up and create an art-damaged rock and roll band known as the Panther. By 1981, they would release their first album, the classic Behind the Magnolia Curtain, on the UK's Rough Trade record label. This record and the ones that would follow would become a major influence on bands like Primal Scream, the John Spencer Blues Explosion, and The Fall. By the following year, Chilton would leave the band, but Tav Falco relentlessly and possibly stubbornly kept moving forward. Simultaneously, Tav would continue making short films, transitioning into acting, publishing a couple of books, and releasing a handful of his own solo recordings. Now, while much of his catalog centers around traditional rock and roll and rockabilly, he's also dabbled in adapting tango and cabaret music into his arsenal. And he's done it with an honesty and an artistic passion that makes Tav Falco a tireless American original. Tav Falco's Panther Burns have just begun their 2023 Ride the Snake Tour, which not only chronicles their favorites over the last 4 decades, it also comes in the heels of their most recent release on ORG Music, the Nashville Sessions, live at the Bridgestone Arena Studios. And it is wild. And so is my conversation with the great Tav Falco from the unapproachable Panther Burns on Baxie's Musical Podcast. I've been listening to the new record, Nashville Sessions, live at the Bridgestone Arena Studios. You know, I think for those who know your music and know it well, I mean, there's something so just wonderfully mesmerizing about your music. You just create this seductive and sultry mood. It feels like there's a fire burning somewhere. That's pretty typical of all your music, not just this recording, but this live performance is terrific.
Well, thank you for that. We are smoke makers and fellow casters, and that's how we do it. We're an Orphic band. By that I mean, my music is part of the Orphic vision, going down into the underworld, into the underground, and we are an underground band. But that's rather than a simplistic statement like that. That truly is where our creativity comes from. Is in the dark waters of the unconscious mind, and that's what we do. We stir up those waters, and there we find the creative impulse.
And you can always hear that going back to the very beginning. There's something amazing about it, maybe even a little unsettling from time to time, but when you come right down to it, you're still creating this tremendous art where you're taking traditional rock and roll music, and whether it's rock and roll or rockabilly or however you want to call it, and you turn it into an avant-garde piece of art That takes some real creativity to pull that off.
Well, I came to it's a treatment. Some might call it a concept, but it just naturally evolved for me when I picked up the guitar. In that I came from the traditional to the quasi avant-garde, and so I was interested in country folk blues on the one hand and Karl Heinz Stockhausen on the other, and that's what I was listening to when everybody else in the 70s and 80s, listening to that which was trendy at the time. Some take nothing wrong with friends, but I followed a path that I had been exposed to in theater and art and film, and I brought that into music when I picked up the guitar. I had been making films with indigenous artists and topics of indigenous phenomena around me in Memphis. And I was with an art action video group, Televista Projects. And we did a lot of recordings with blues artists, rock and roll politicians, painters, sculptors, photographers. And pretty soon, by virtue of the blues that I was aiming my camera at, I picked up the guitar myself. And I started playing. And, after we recorded the R.L. Burnside piece, Honky Tonk, down at his joint in Mississippi, way out in the boondocks in Mississippi, I became entranced, mesmerized of the trance music that R.L. Burnside was playing. I never quite heard blues like that before, two-chord blues. A very swamp-like, way down in the swamp. And so I started trying to play guitar like that. And then in my first appearance publicly with the guitar at the Orpheum Theater, I destroyed the guitar on stage with a chainsaw and an electric gill saw, playing the Bourgeoisie Blues by Leadbelly in a R.L. Burnside style of guitar playing.
Was that like in the middle of the show, or was that the showstopper? Because I would think once you destroy the guitar, show's over.
We were, I was, entr'acte. I was entr'acte with, on the Mudboy and the Neutrons Halloween show at the Orpheum Theater, the showplace of the Mid-South at Main and Beale Streets in Memphis. And there on the big theater stage, Mudboy and the Neutrons were having their so-called last waltz performance, which was in vogue at the time. The band did theirs, and Mudboy, this is Jim Dickinson's band, Mudboy and the Neutrons, the illustrious record producer from Memphis and recording artist. So he had the show, and I was performing with Mudboy in a theatrical context. We had a mime troupe called Big Dixie Brick Company. And we were doing interpretive artists on stage. In fact, we formed our mime troupe parallel to Mudboy and the Neutrons at the very same time. So there was always a symbiosis between their musical group and our art action group. And so when Mudboy staged this show at the Orpheum, they asked us to come down and perform on it. And for some reason, I was the only one available in Big Dixie on that date. So I went down and incarnated two characters that I had developed. I performed with the rat head. I had a rat's head constructed, and I mainly just danced with the band with that and did some interpretive gestures. And then I also did the tube man, where I was wrapped in yards and yards of clear plastic tubing and moved about the stage with that. Oh, yes, and then the three-legged man. I had a prosthesis for the third leg, and that was effective. But then, entr'acte, I asked Jim Dickinson if I could go out on stage and do the Bourgeoisie Blues. In other words, at their intermission. And Jim said, well, yeah, why not? So I went out there with this electric guitar that I had bought from a neighbor, a Silvertone for $5, and I had it routed into my Bell and Howell 16 millimeter motion picture projector, amplifier, and speaker. I had that on stage, and then I had my own very large format television monitor, and I had Willie Eggleston's son, the photographer, Bill Eggleston, operating the Televista video camera. So we had our own environment. I had my own environment on stage, pointed at the audience. And then surrounding us were three WHBQ broadcast television cameras. And, one thing led to another in the bourgeoisie blues. And at the height of it, I pulled out a police whistle and started blowing that, and put the guitar down between two chairs I had on stage, and proceeded to destroy that thing. Saw it in half, and the audience went completely berserk. They went because the sound was really horrendous. The way they had me mic'd, it just filled up the theater with this, splinters and guitar strings and electronic, explosions all over the theater, and so. It was a memorable and heightened moment, I think, in the history of the Orpheum Theater. Alex Chilton saw me for the first time.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, because I had read that is one of the things that he was struck by, not only your performance of the song, but once you destroyed the guitar, he was really intrigued, which is for a guy considering what he had been through with the Box Tops and Big Star, and you talk about Jim Dickinson, their association to Arden Studios, for him to notice something like that had to be a pretty remarkable performance.
Well, I was in evening clothes, tails, frock coat, and white gloves that I'd cut the fingers out of so I could play the guitar. And I think it was a rather astonishing figure that I cut on stage that day, my first public performance. And I was pretty much under the influence of the theater of cruelty of Antonin Artaud, and the idea of a total assault on stage,
right.
Not necessarily with volume and that kind of intensity, but more of a subliminal, cacophonic distortion, more of a delivery of distortion and random noise, in addition to lyrical guitar melodic interpretation of a rather provocative blues song that Leadbelly recorded in the 1930s, home of the brave, land of the free, I don't want to be mistreated by no bourgeoisie. I'm in a bourgeois town. Spread the news all around. So people heard that. They heard that very clearly.
When you make that kind of artistic statement and you're performing that, and then with all the visuals that you were associating yourself with that night, what happens after that? I mean, you said that the crowd went wild. Were you invited back? I mean, what was the next performance like that? And was every performance after that in the same shocking vein?
Well, what happened at that moment on stage, at the conclusion of the destruction of the guitar, I sawed it in half, and then I took the chainsaw and with the skill saw, and then I took the chainsaw and finished it off. And so at the height of this frenzy, then I passed out on stage, and they drugged me off.
Really?
But I did not repeat that. I may at some point in the future. In fact, I just took that frock coat out of the closet and took it in and had it dry cleaned. So that might be a portent of something to come again in the character of Eugene Baffle. And that character is also the narrator in my book, Ghost Behind the Sun, Splendor, Enigma, and Death, Mondo Memphis, Volume 1, published by Creation Books in London and New York. But there, Eugene Baffle tells the entire book, which is basically on the trajectory of Memphis, Tennessee, from its inception through my tenure in the Bluff City.
So, give me a little bit of a history between you and Alex Chilton at this point. So now you've been introduced to him. He sees this performance, and then the two of you form Panther Burns together. Tell me about the formation of that and working with Alex.
Well, I did not meet Alex on this occasion at the Orpheum. It was about a month later at a party I had at my house across the tracks from the Garden District in which Alex lived with his parents in a wonderful Memphis home. I would call it kind of a maison or chateau. So I was across the tracks there where the working class people live by the L&N Railroad, the Louisville and Nashville Railroad track. And, well, I had this party, and some of the girls in a band called the Clits were at my house, namely Amanda Jones, the bass player. And she called Alex on the phone from my pad and talking to him, and he said, "What's that? I hear this guitar in the background. What is that? I haven't heard anything like that. What's that?" She said, "Oh, that's that guy that was at the Orpheum that destroyed the guitar, remember?" Well, I'm coming right over. So he came over that night and joined the party, and he and I stayed up all night playing the guitar. After the party ended, we still kept going. I only played very rudimentary country blues. Of course, Alex not only could play guitar, rock and roll guitar, but he could play just about anything else you want to hear. So anyway, we had a lot of fun that night. It was a really heightened experience. And so he started dropping by my house. And then he began to urge me to start a band. And he said, "I have a drummer, a renegade librarian over at the University of Memphis." And he said, "All we need is a name if you want to do this." And I thought to myself, look at all the pretty girls attracted to this music. And I thought, well, why not? I really didn't know who Alex was, you know. All I knew is that night he played guitar like some kind of muse. He was mythical on the guitar. And he was playing my guitar, which was a very funky, out of tune guitar, but he made it sound like a bird. Anyway, I thought, well, let's think about this. And then he came over and I had the Televista camera, the video camera, and we started making some videotapes. And we had a big snare drum in my place. We had a snare drum that was about 2 inches deep, but about 2 feet wide in diameter. So that made a very strange sound. We had that. We had my guitar, and then Alex would bring over, we had my Silvertone, Alex would bring over an acoustic. So we started playing at my place and making videos and recordings. All this is in my book, Mondo Memphis, at chapter 13, the last chapter of the book. So then I was hearing around Memphis, people were talking about Panther Burn. Panther Burn, Panther Burn. What is that? What is Panther Burn? So I started asking around, and a musician in Mudboy and the Neutron, Sid Selvage, singer-songwriter, a career of his own too. He was from that area of Mississippi, from Greenville, which is very close to Panther Burn, Mississippi. So it's a place.
Okay.
And he told me it's a plantation, and it's still going. And then he told me the legend of the plantation. This plantation, by the way, was owned by the Percy family of poets and writers in Mississippi, co-owned by them. Cotton plantation. Still there, still thriving. And then there's the legend, of course, of the plantation. You know that? You know that legend? You want to hear it?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Around the turn of the century, there was a clearing of the land for further cultivation of cotton. So the forest was being cleared away, the brush, the underbrush, everything, so they could start planting. Well, there were a lot of animals living in these in the forest and in the brush. Rabbit, bear, foxes, and panthers. And there was one panther that was not so happy about losing his habitat. And what they did, they cleared the land and they put up these big big piles of debris and brush and trees, limbs and all of that. And later on, they would come by and they burn those brush piles down. So this panther had nowhere to go when they cleared out this land, and so he started howling all night and raiding the chicken coops of the planters and the farmers, and became a general nuisance. So they formed a posse. Farmers armed themselves and formed a posse to track this animal down. They also set traps for him, but the panther was cunning and he eluded their traps. One night they chased him into a cane brake of wild cane growing. They sicked their dogs on him, their hounds. They tracked him into this cane brake, and they set that cane brake on fire. So the howls and the shrieks of the panther were such that they named that place Panther Burn. And I thought, well, there was Muddy Waters, the Howlin' Wolf, the Rolling Stones, and now there's the Panther Burns.
Panther Burns. So the first time I became aware of Panther Burns would have been like the mid '80s when I was in college, and I remember that we had a copy of Behind the Magnolia Curtain, which was the first record, and I think we had The World We Knew also. And the thing I loved about the music on those records is there's this total commitment that you have to the art of making that music, treating it like an avant-garde piece of art. Tell me about those early records. I mean, obviously you're going from performance and art action, and now you're putting it down, on tape and turning it into something that's tangibly held. What was that experience like to get those songs out into the public and into people's hands?
Well, Alex he criticized me. He said, half what we're doing is entertainment. And you're trying to turn this into an art form of some kind. Mm. And I said, well, Alex, I understand you as an entertainer, but I also hear something else in what you do. And I hear something else in what the Cramps do. And for me, it is a kind of, especially what the Cramps are doing, is again a kind of theater of cruelty from Antonin Artaud. I sensed a certain demonic gradient. And with Alex, I sensed something a little different, more of a lyrical quality at his best. And even though it was mainly Americana that Alex was singing, I felt there were musical overtones that took him beyond the realm of entertainment. At least that touched me in a way that was more than simply being entertained. Now, with my work, I explained to Alex, I said, well, yes, I want to entertain. I do want to entertain, but if I'm going to concentrate on making music with the guitar and with my voice, it's going to become a means of personal inner expression for me. And I'm not going to compromise that. And if I don't have anything meaningful to express alongside the fun and the exhilaration and the noise making and the smoke making and the commotion of rock and roll, then I'm not that interested in it. Then it's just kind of a hedonistic bacchanal that I do on stage. And that's one thing, that's part of it, but it can't be all of it, not for me. So there has to be a poetic moment. There has to be a moment of expressionist feeling that people take home residually and they don't forget.
There's a wonderful piece of video that's out there, and it's from 1979, and it's on a local television show, I believe, in Memphis, where the band is performing, and the host clearly doesn't understand what you're trying to do. And there's this conversation between you and the host where she's trying to understand what she just saw. And I think what you did was actually quite admirable, and I was able to understand it, where you were trying to explain that what you do is exactly what you just explained to me just now about the art of your performance, not just about whether it's musical or easily understood, but there's an artistic element to it. And I found that explanation to be really interesting, the way you did it, and I have to believe that was understood by some, but probably not understood by all. Did you ever get a great deal of resistance from audience members or club owners or whatever it might be for taking that artistic stance rather than a more musical one?
Panther Burns have been greeted with howls of contempt on the one hand and with squeals of ecstasy on the other. So we have polarized all whom you've just mentioned, club owners, audiences, critics, and others. We have polarized that audience, not so much by intention, although I have intended to be provocative on certain themes. On other themes, I've intended to entertain, to enthrall, to enchant, to cast a spell, to seduce with a vital elegance.
You know, when I hear your music and when I hear, how it's grown over the years, especially with the latest, record, the Nashville Sessions, I hear what you're trying to do. There is some provocation. There is a seduction to it. And interestingly enough, you're doing it in multiple styles too, which doesn't necessarily clash with other music you've done. I mean, I hear, there's a bossa nova song on that record. There's also more traditional rock. You're able to make art out of all of those things and still establish the mood that your music is known for. I think that's really extraordinary, that even after all these years, you still have the ability to evoke a reaction and turn what you do into an avant-garde piece of art. I mean, I think it's really telling about the artist you are. It's uncompromising and unapologetic, and I think that's what's so damn wonderful about Falco and Panther Burns.
Well, the musician plays for the audience. He plays music for the audience. And an artist draws from within himself. And he uses materials, genres, and modes at hand. Some of the material in Panther Burns I have written and created. On the other hand, I have flogged about every genre imaginable, from tango to rock and roll to blues to jazz to pop standards, bossa nova, calypso, ballads. There's hardly anything. Well, there's hardly a genre that was so sacred that I have not flogged. And it's a means to an end. It's like let's write a Elizabethan sonnet. Well, you take on a form. You take on you have to work within that genre if you want to create and write through sonnet. So if you want to create a tango, for example, you have this wonderful form before you. And it's got a structure, it's got a form, it's got a tonality, it has a rhythm. And you can use that and express your own self in that. And that's what I do. I have only one song. I have only one song to sing in any genre I touch and in any song I might compose. It's still that naked, lonely, subjective I, secret I, and that's all people really want from an artist. That's all they want. They only want that vision of that artist. That's what draws people. I don't draw a lot of people. I draw some people. That's okay for me. But the people who are drawn are those that identify and feel something within myself that's coming out, whether it's in a picture or in a book or whether it's in a song or a film. Speaking of films, I just completed my first feature movie, the Urania trilogy. I just came from Paris, where the Cinémathèque Française took that film into their permanent collection, along with my short films, which they collected a few years ago. And now I'm here in New York in advance of our U.S. tour to go back to Anthology Film Archives and speak with them about a screening of the entire trilogy. They screened part one in 2017, and now I finally completed this trilogy, and I'm looking for a screening. I'm seeking screening for 2024, 2025.
So your film work is pretty lengthy. I mean, you've done a lot of it. I noticed on the website there is a video tour diary that is available, and there's a preview of it on the website. And as I'm watching it, I can't help but feel that there's a story that needs to be told. Maybe if it's in the form of a documentary about Panther Burns. Would you ever consider doing something like that, where they get to tell the story of your art and how this has gone on for as long as it has?
Well, I'm open to that. I'm always open to documentation. Quite a bit of that myself.
Because I think it would be fascinating.
Before I started Panther Burns. But I might say that the tour diary is available to all of those who bought the LP, the vinyl LP of the Nashville sessions, and or downloaded it, bought the digital download. There's a QR code where that tour diary is accessible. It is around 39 minutes in length, and is a collection of phone videos made by various people. I edited that. It took me about 6 weeks to edit the thing. It was not easy, but I did it, and I wanted the audience to have that document, because it is the stark reality, mainly of a stage show, a little off camera, a little backstage, and some other places. But further, in 2015, J.P. Olson, an HBO producer here in New York, made a short documentary on me called "Make Me Know You're Mine," after the Conway Twitty song that I often sing. And he filmed that, recorded it here in New York on video at a show I did, and a lot of off-camera going around, getting my amplifier repaired, getting off the bus, getting out of a taxi with my equipment here in the West Village where I stay. And it's about 19 minutes, so it's a quick view. Since then, a filmmaker in Rome, Michele Daniele, has been following me around for around 3 years with a 4K video camera, and he's got quite a lot of material on me in America and in Rome. I'm not quite sure when or what he's going to do with that, but he assures me he's going to finish it. He wants to come to Thailand. You know, I decamped from Europe to Bangkok about November before last. I'd been living in Vienna for quite a while because I was attracted to the art and music and culture. In the Cinémathèque in Vienna, I was spent a lot of time in there. And the theater, wonderful English theater in Vienna. So Vienna's a big theater and cinema town. And I made 2 short films in Vienna that are on my YouTube channel. And they're forerunners of the Urania trilogy, which is a trilogy of intrigue films in black and white, 16 millimeter motion picture.
It sounds absolutely fascinating.
Well, I'm okay with the result. I'm pleased with the result. I don't know whether one can ever be totally satisfied, but I'm fully I'm fully acceptive of the result. I had a lot of delays in finishing. The filming was finished some months ago in Vienna and Part 3 in Venice. And then I was not able to start editing because of tour dates, other interventions until February. And then I worked night and day flogging that editing straight through till August, till the end of August. It was a massive job, much more even than the filming was to edit that movie. 2 hours and 20 minutes in duration.
So the new album, the Nashville Sessions, live at Bridgestone Arena Studios, it's an absolutely wonderful performance. I know you're on tour, going all over the U.S. Sounds like if people get a chance to see you, it's definitely be worth the effort to get out there.
Well, I hope they come, and we're bringing our music to your town, and we hope you come see Panther Burns, or behold anything quite like the unapproachable Panther Burns.
Tav, I appreciate the time today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Baxi. Thank you for your erudite understanding and perception of our group, and for your time and interest.
Thank you, Tav. The name of the new record from Tav Falco and the Panther Burns is the Nashville Sessions, live at the Bridgestone Arena Studios. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like it, share it, tell all your friends about it. Make sure you check out our regular updates on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also email me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to know what you think. And thanks again for listening to Baxy's Musical Podcast.